Here's a weird headline. Blizzard ending partnership with China. Now, that's weird indeed because that would be factually accurate, honest, and definitive. But instead, we get the AP's headline, which of course reads this, like the press release that it is: Blizzard-Netease gaming partnership in China to end. Now, it sounds very similar, but it's not the same. We need to take a deeper look at this story and see where this rabbit hole leads. Here we go. When news broke yesterday, we learned that Blizzard Entertainment is ending its relationship with NetEase. That's a gaming company that it's been in business with, or licensed to, since 2008. NetEase was an intermediary for games delivery for titles like Diablo, Overwatch, and World of Warcraft. They made it possible for Blizzard to extend their reach. Now, a lot of companies do this in China just because, you have to be doing business with a Chinese company to get your products to the Chinese. That made it possible for the Chinese gold farmers, if you want to go back in time, to radically change the in-game economy for multiple titles, but most specifically for World of Warcraft. This in turn eventually created the if you can't beat them, join them kind of a situation that allowed Blizzard to move forward with a currency and token exchange kind of a concept of their own. And I'm not going to dive into all of that today, just an aside that I wanted to mention because it actually helped shape, in effect, what's happening now with the predatory consumer approach that they have to monetization, and actually helped guide other game creators to do that. But we'll set that aside because it's well enough for now. But the issues between Blizzard and NetEase have come out of more than just a failure to renegotiate. There apparently was some bad blood behind the scenes, and we'll get to that in a moment. But it may very well be that Blizzard is looking for a different partner in China. But I actually don't think that's the case. I think it's part of a larger trend. And we're seeing it in many different sectors, not just gaming. Because globally, major companies have been leaving China since 2019. And even before, if you look at some of the headlines going back into 2015 through 2017. Much of what has been driving that exodus, of course, from China has been their actions in the global marketplace. The much needed trade imbalance was addressed by the previous US administration that was in the White House, which exposed some massive holes in the supply chain and the rampant theft of intellectual property by China. Now you would say, no, that's by the companies. No. That's by China. Because when you do business in China, you're doing business with the Chinese government. I'm not kidding. Many citizens outside of China fail to actually recognize this, and I'm sure you guys probably already knew it all. In fact, recently Apple and other manufacturing interests were instructed that if they did not pull their engineers and other tech professionals from China, that those professionals would lose their citizenship. So it was, if you don't do this, this bad thing happens. That's a little carrot and stick, if you ask me. And this comes on the heels of many years of exploitation by China forcing technology transfers. And you should look that up if you don't know what that is. It's a method for forcibly stealing the means to advance from more advanced countries and industries, which again, I think we all know China's been doing forever. Most of the government's interest is obviously in tech manufacturing, and that makes a lot of sense. They have a lot of catch up to do. They're specifically focused on the microprocessor manufacturing because, hey, who does that better than, well, us and Taiwan and a couple of other countries? Now, this was fully exposed during the recent global crisis. It actually showed just how vulnerable the entire world was because of the way supply chains work and the fact that those supply chains are primarily tied to China. And a few other countries as well. And whether or not this is actually the motivating factor for Blizzard, Activision Blizzard in this case, to reevaluate their business relationship with China, well, that's purely speculative on my part, although a lot of news coming out in the last few hours would indicate maybe that bad blood was beyond what we can even recognize, because maybe there was pressure government to government, or a realization that they could just completely be cut off from China regardless. So better to just end that deal and move on. Now, a lot of companies outside of the tech industry are relocating their manufacturing interests. So this isn't new. Of course, this isn't a manufacturing situation. This is a distribution situation, but they're largely the same. If you want a product in point A and you need to get it to point B, there's a logistics circumstance there. Well, maybe there's not a logistics circumstance here, but more of a, well, we're not going to be able to sell to them anyway, kind of an interest. I'll give you some examples, though, of manufacturers that have recently moved away from China, or largely moved away from China, maybe not completely, and those would be Nike and Adidas. Now, they manufacture a lot of apparel and tennis shoes, and they've been making a major switch into some other countries, and I'm going to mention India and a few others. So those efforts to move outside of China are coming along for a reason. They're specifically trying to avoid being closely tied to the forced labor market that, sometimes reduces the manufacturing cost of items. And if you don't know what forced labor is, read between the lines. And again, Nike, of course, has been tied to this for a long time in a very negative way. And there's other companies as well. I mean, even in the car industry, I think BMW was recently tied to a lot of that stuff, but we'll set that aside for now, because that's not what the video is about. We're going to return to Blizzard. Their licensed distribution of games through NetEase was essentially also enabling some tech transfer. NetEase had been able to position themselves firmly in second place behind Tencent, the leading Chinese gaming interest in China. Blizzard accounts for about 10% of the revenue for NetEase, so it's a decent chunk. I mean, and nobody wants to take a 10% pay cut, right? But on the Blizzard side of the equation, it's a little different. NetEase also distributes a decent percentage of their licensed games because of Blizzard. In fact, when I say decent, I'm talking about 60 to 80% of their licensed gaming content is Blizzard. So this is going to be a hit. This will definitely change the landscape in China as far as games distribution goes. Now, the only game from Activision Blizzard that is unaffected by this is the brand new mobile game Diablo Immortal, which is actually covered on a completely different contract for a very long period of time. And because it's governed in that way, it is excluded from all these other licensing deals, which seem to be renewed about every 3 years like clockwork. Well, not this time. And because of that, NetEase shares fell over 10% in trading almost immediately in Hong Kong. And actually, that's a kind of a disturbing trend for NetEase. NetEase has actually fallen off a cliff to about 50% of its value from 2021, which is kind of disappointing for investors. And like a lot of other Chinese investors, they invest heavily in other equities or other companies, primarily US based. Seems to be a regular pattern. I mean, just remember back when Tencent owned a giant chunk of Epic Games. The most telling thing here is the statement from California-based Blizzard, Activision Blizzard, and it was this: no deal could be reached that was consistent with Blizzard's operating principles and commitments to players and employees. Well, let's translate that into understandable English. We can't give away our IP ownership rights and allow control of data of millions of users or millions of players. I think a lot of that has to come down to the privacy stuff that we've been discovering when working with a lot of these companies. This reportedly was part of the real rift in the relationship that actually began and became exposed because of Diablo Immortal. Now, In a larger sense, this also canceled another broadly available game because of mobile gaming, a kind of a new secondary version of World of Warcraft for your phone or tablet. So that entire 3 years of effort that was put into making that game, gone. Now, Activision Blizzard may follow in the footsteps of Epic at this point. They may abandon China completely, and obviously for the better. Recent governmental crackdowns in the gaming industry and on games in China has led to more gaming entities to abandon titles. And they're skipping that because of the extreme overreach and regulatory shenanigans that are placed on companies that try to market games there. Activision Blizzard may be better off sacrificing their 3% of revenue generated by this particular deal and just move on, because I guarantee you that 3% can be made up elsewhere, perhaps in India. Now, speculation in the global marketplace, and there's a lot of international stories out there you can go and grab on this particular, subject. The global marketplace is not only evaluating this, but they're placing a lot of scrutiny on the fall of the gaming sector right now in China. And it looks like it's also going to fall in other entertainment sectors as well. So we're extending in China beyond gaming into some other sectors that are, teetering on disaster, perhaps. Now, growing political rifts, of course, between the US and China, they're essentially the shifting sands on this overall, cold trade war, perhaps. I don't know what you want to call it, but there's a decent chance that TikTok on the social media side will actually be banned outright, as it is, consistently found to be in violation of privacy and other regulatory compliance here in the United States. It's been exposed on multiple occasions that TikTok, the app, it spies on you all the time, which is, that's not good. If a foreign entity, because again, TikTok, owned by ByteDance, is a partnership with China. Because again, when you do business with a Chinese company, you're doing business with China proper, at least the government anyway. So at the end of the day, this Blizzard deal will actually have little effect in other nations around the world. It's not going to change the landscape all that much. There'll be a small revenue drop for Activision Blizzard, which could be essentially a bad quarter at worst, but more likely just, a line item of a loss that won't be consequential. The games will still be distributed everywhere else, and they'll be serviced everywhere else as well, at least where all of the active customers are. But it might point towards an increasingly isolated China when it comes to, us and of course other major trading partners around the globe. So I ask you, because we're to that point in the video now, what do you think? Is this a sign of things to come in China when it comes to relations with us and maybe other major countries around the globe, at least going forward? Is this much ado about nothing and just simply softening the ground for a deal with, let's say, a competitor like Tencent? Maybe, since they're number one. But are any of the things that I mentioned here today actually tied together? Because unfortunately, that's just the way my brain works. I tie this, and we end up where we are making videos, multiple times a day if I'm lucky. But hey, what do you think? Please feel free to leave your commentary down below, because I'd like to have a conversation on this. And if you think I'm crazy, go ahead and say it. It's fine. But I don't think I am. I think we're going to see other industries and other completely different sectors walk away from China in the near future. And I think a lot of it's being driven by some trade issues we've been having for a long time. Also, be sure to support other independent creators here on the platform. There are people that specialize in China specifically and talk about it every single day. And I've discovered some, courtesy of some of you, that have allowed me to even further focus on what real issues are actually happening day to day over there, which I think is helpful, especially when you talk about the things that I talk about on the regular, because business-related entertainment is tied globally at this point. So being more informed is not a bad thing. thing. So support those other channels. Be sure to like their content, subscribe if you really enjoy it, comment on whatever videos that you think engage you. Let's just put it that way. And of course, share that content as well. And with that, be sure to take care of yourself, take care of others, wash your hands, of course, because it is good hygiene. And until next time, bye. And don't forget to check out my Rumble at rumble.com/CultureCasino.
Thanks for visiting today. Be sure you're subscribed and hit that for alerts.
Yay!
Of course, like and share all of the videos that you can, as it helps with the algorithm. Have a great day.